seriously and filed for divorce. Hi, everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. We've got a brand new story to share, and trust me, this one is worth hearing. So let's begin. My name is Tessie, and before I dive into this, I want to say something up front. Before you pass judgment, please listen to the story till the end. There are important life lessons here, and I think we can all take something from what happened to me. For the longest time, I consider myself happily married. My husband Jerry and I had a relationship that felt easy, fun, and filled with laughter. We had our own way of keeping things exciting, and one of those ways was through playful teasing. If there was one thing Jerry loved to talk about, it was how amazing he was in the bedroom. He had this ongoing joke about being the best I'd ever had, and he took a lot of pride in. Now here's the thing, he wasn't wrong. He was really good, and he knew it over the years. He would brag not in an arrogant way, but in a way that made it clear he was confident in himself. He would randomly remind me of the things she could do, the things he would do, just to keep the anticipation alive. It became part of our routine, something that added a bit of excitement between us. And honestly, I enjoyed it. Hearing him talk about himself like that didn't bother me. It made me laugh, and at times it built up the anticipation of what was to come when we were alone. So for me, this wasn't anything serious. It was just us, a playful dynamic that made our relationship feel fun and alive. But little did I know, one small joke, one simple sentence was about to change everything. One night, Jerry and I were just unwinding in the living room, enjoying a quiet moment together. After a long day, the TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. It was just background noise. As we lounged comfortably, Jerry, as usual, was in a playful mood. He started with his usual teasing. Tonight was no different. He stretched out his arms and said something ridiculous about how he would carry me into the bedroom and make me sing in every language known to man. I burst out laughing, shaking my head at this confidence. It was so over the top that I couldn't help but find it funny. He kept going, adding details, hyping himself up as if he were some kind of untouchable champion. It was harmless, just the usual back and forth between us. Maybe it was the mood, or I just felt like throwing a little playful jab back at him. So without thinking too much, I smirked and said, "My ex has always been better than you in bed." The words left my mouth as a joke, a silly teasing response. I expected Jerry to snap back with something even more dramatic to turn it into a playful banter, like we always did. Maybe he'd roll his eyes and call my bluff, or he'd get up, scoop me into his arms, and say something cheesy, like, "Let me remind you why you married me." Then I'd brace myself for some kind of exaggerated reaction, something equally ridiculous. But that's not what happened. The moment I said it, his entire expression changed. His smile vanished. He suddenly turned cold. It was like I had flipped a switch inside him for a second. I thought he was pretending that he was playing up the drama. But then, without a word, he stood up. He didn't say thing. He just walked out of the room. At first, I thought he was just pretending to be mad, trying to make a point. You know how people act, upset for a little while to make you feel guilty. That's what I assumed was happening. I expected him to come back into the room and maybe crack a joke about how I needed to get my eyes checked, or say something sarcastic to fire back at me. But that didn't happen. Instead, he stayed out of sight for the rest of the night. The next morning, I woke up thinking things would be back to normal. I figured I'd find him in the kitchen making his usual coffee, maybe giving me a small side eye, but ultimately moving past it. I greeted him with a simple "good morning," just to test the waters. No response, not even a glance in my direction. He picked up his coffee mug and walked away like I wasn't even in the room. That was when it hit me. He was actually upset, not pretending to be mad or suing for attention, but genuinely, deeply angry. I told myself he just needed time. Some people take longer to process their emotions, and I wanted to be the bigger person by giving him space. He might need a full day to shake it off. But that night when he walked right past me in the hallway, without even acknowledging me, I started feeling uneasy. I tried again, this time a bit more directly. "Jerry, are we seriously not going to talk today?" He didn't even stop walking, just went straight into the bedroom and closed the door behind him. By the second day, the silence was unbearable. It wasn't just that he wasn't speaking. He wasn't even seeing me. If I walked into a room, he would either leave or act as if I didn't exist. It was the kind of treatment you give a stranger, not someone you share a home with. I started replaying the moment in my head, trying to figure out if I had said something worse than I thought. It was just a joke, right? A stupid offhand comment meant to tease him. But clearly, to him it was more than that. By midweek, my patience started wearing thin. I could admit that my joke was out of line, but was it really worth punishing me like this? It felt like we were in some sort of twisted stand. One, except I was the only one trying to end it. I sat next to him on the couch one evening, hoping the silence would force him to speak. Instead, he picked up the remote, turned on the TV, and pretended I wasn't sitting right there. That's what I knew. This wasn't just about cooling off anymore. He decided to shut me out. That realization stung more than anything. I'd always believed that no matter what happened, we would talk things through. That was how relationships worked. Right. But now I was just sitting in my own house, feeling like I was living with a stranger. And the worst part, I had no idea what to do next. By the end of the week, I had convinced myself that things would get better. I told myself that he would eventually calm down and at least hear me out. I had rehearsed a dozen different ways to apologize. Again, to explain that it was just a joke. To remind him that our marriage was stronger than one careless comment. But as the day stretched on and the silence between us remained thick and unbroken, a small part of me started to worry. Maybe I had underestimated how deeply my words had cut him. Maybe this wasn't just about the joke anymore. That evening I heard the front door open and close. Jerry walked in without saying a word. His expression unreadable. He avoided looking at me. Then without hesitation, he reached into his bag and pulled out a stack of papers. He walked over to the dining table, set them down in front of me, and slid them across the surface sign. At first, I didn't even process what he meant. I frowned, looking down at the papers, my mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. The words at the top of the document hit me like a slap to the face. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jerry's face remained cold, his eyes empty of the warmth I had known for years. "It's over, Tessie." I let out a short, nervous laugh, still thinking and hoping this was some kind of twisted attempt to get back at me. A part of me was waiting for him to break character, to smirk and say, "See how it feels." But that moment never came. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to take the pen and end our marriage. That's when I realized he wasn't playing. He wasn't using this as some kind of exaggerated way to prove a point. He had actually filed for divorce over a joke. I felt the air leave my lungs as I stared at the papers. I wanted to say something, to tell him this was ridiculous, that we had been through so much together, and he was really willing to throw it all away over a stupid comment. But looking at him, I knew he had already made up his mind. I refused to sign. My first instinct was to fix this, to make him understand that I never meant any harm. I thought if I explained myself, if I laid it all out for him, he would see reason. So I tried. I told him it was just a joke, a stupid offhand comment. That meant nothing. I reminded him of how much I loved him, how solid our marriage had always been, and how ridiculous it was to throw everything away over one sentence. But every time he spoke, it was like talking to a wall. Haberly responded, only shaking his head, refusing to engage when reasoning didn't work. I apologized again and again. I told him I was sorry for hurting his feelings, that I should have never made that joke, and that I would take it back in a heartbeat. If I could, I swallowed my pride, put my ego aside, and begged him to reconsider. But no matter what I said, it wasn't enough. His mind was already made up. He didn't see my words as a joke anymore. He saw them as the truth. He was convinced that for me to say that, I had to have been thinking about my ex in his head. There was no other explanation. The idea that I could just blurt something out to get a reaction never even crossed his mind. He believed I had compared them. Before that, I had replayed my past relationship in my head so many times that I still remember the details of my intimacy with my ex. To him, my words weren't a joke. They were a confession. I tried to reassure him, to tell him that my ex was nothing but a memory, a closed chapter one hadn't thought about in years. But he wouldn't hear it. He had already rewritten the story in his head, one where I had never really moved on, where I had been secretly longing for someone else while lying next to him. Every night, it didn't matter how much I explained, how much I swore that he was wrong. He believed what he wanted to believe. I realized I was no longer fighting to explain the joke. I was fighting against a version of me he had already created in his head. And no matter what I said, he wasn't going to change his mind. And the scariest part, there was nothing I could do to change his mind. The days after that night felt like a blur. I went through all the motions, waking up, sitting in silence, watching him avoid me. But it all felt like I was watching my marriage crumble in slow motion. At first, I was angry at myself for saying it. I kept wishing I could rewind time and swallow my words before they ever left my mouth. Maybe if I had just laughed instead of speaking, or chosen a different joke, none of this would have happened. Maybe I had ruined everything with my own stupidity. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to question if this was really about that one joke. How could a single sentence, something meant to be playful, be enough to break an entire marriage? Was our relationship so fragile that one bad joke could destroy it? Did my husband really love me the way I thought he did, or had I been blind to something deep? All along, the more I reflected, the more uneasy I felt. Maybe this wasn't just about what I said. Jerry had probably been carrying insecurities I never knew about. He had always been confident, or at least that's what he showed on the outside. But what if all of that was just a mask? What if he had been convincing himself just as much as he had been trying to convince me? Then other thought hit me like a punch to the stomach. What if he had already checked out of them marriage before this even happened? What if he had been waiting for a reason to leave and I had just handed him the perfect excuse? A person doesn't throw away a life together over a joke unless they are already looking for an exit. I wrestled with these thoughts in silence, because no matter what the truth was, one thing became painfully clear. He wasn't willing to forgive me. He wasn't willing to have a conversation. He wasn't willing to fight for us. And if he wasn't willing to do any of those things, then maybe I'd been the only one holding on to this marriage in the first place. I spent another week trying to fix what felt like an impossible situation. But no matter what I said, no matter how much Jerry refused to budge when he put the divorce papers in front of me, again, I didn't cry this time. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I just looked at him and asked one final question. Are you really willing to throw away our entire marriage over this? He didn't hesitate. He just said, you already did, and that was it. That was the moment I knew I had been holding on to something that no longer existed. So I signed, not because I wanted to, not because I stopped loving him, but because I finally understood that a marriage where one mistake, one joke can end. Everything is not a marriage worth fighting for. A relationship built on real love should be able to survive misunderstandings. A marriage built on trust should have room for forgiveness. But if Jerry truly loved me, he would have listened. If he truly trusted me, he would have understood. And because he didn't, I had no choice but to let go. Ye wish. I could say it felt freeing, that I walked away with my head held high. But the truth is, it hurt like hell. It still does. But what hurts more is realizing that I was the only one fighting for us, and a marriage where only one person is fighting is already over. Looking back, this whole situation taught me things I never thought I'd have to learn the hard way. You know, people say experience is the best teacher, but I never imagined my own marriage would become a lesson itself. It's easy to look at a moment like this and say, oh, she shouldn't have joked like that. Or, oh, he's way too sensitive. But real life is never that simple when emotions are involved. People act in ways that don't always make sense. And honestly, that's exactly what happened here. Here are some of the things I learned. Communication is everything. If you're in a relationship where one bad joke can destroy everything, there's a bigger issue beneath the surface. Because let's be real, happy, secure couples don't break up over one sentence. They talk things out. They express how they feel. They try to understand each other. But in my case, Jerry didn't give me that chance. He shut me out completely. And that made me realize something. If your partner isn't willing to have an open and honest conversation with you, then your relationship is built on sand. It might look stable for a while, but the first big wave will wash it all away. Ego and insecurity destroy ya. Love. I used to believe that love was strong enough to overcome anything, that if two people truly cared about each other, they'd find a way to work through their problems. But I've learned that's not always true, because sometimes pride is stronger than love. And ego, it's like poison in a relationship. If someone values their ego more than their partner, then no matter how much love exists, the relationship is bound to fail. If someone won't fight for you, don't fight for them. I spent days trying to fix this. I apologized. I explained myself. I gave him space. I did everything I could to show him that our marriage was worth saving. But the truth is, it takes two people to fight for our relationship. A relationship should never feel like a one-sided battle. If someone refuses to meet you halfway, it's better to walk away. Not every joke is worth making, but not every reaction is justified either. Look, I'm not going to sit here and act like I was completely innocent in all this. I poked the bear. I made the joke. I pushed his buttons, knowing that he had a bit of an ego about this topic. I get it, but did I really deserve to lose my marriage over it? That's the part that still stings. Because yes, I may have lit the MCH, but he's the one who burned everything to the ground. A healthy relationship can survive misunderstandings, bad jokes, and even mistakes. At the end of the day, I'll take responsibility for my part. But let's be real, Jerry overreacted, and I can't help but wonder if the roles were reversed. If he had made a joke about an ex, would I have filed for divorce? No, I would have rolled my eyes, maybe teased him back, and then moved on. So what do you guys think? Was I wrong for making the joke? Or was Jerry's reaction way too extreme? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments.